Namaste. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. Great to be getting together again. It's been a little while because, last month had an extra Thursday in it. But here we are, back again. So wonderful to be in your company. Thank you for joining us this evening and bringing the fullness of your divine presence, the fullness of the power of your practice and your commitment to practice. That we come together in this unified field of consciousness, regardless of, whether somebody's on the other side of the world or just next door. In that field, here we are in that oneness. And that's what all our sadhana practices invite us to go beyond the ordinary mind, because the ordinary mind was created to see separation, differences. And then it tries to put them all back together. But it's an atomizer. It breaks things up. And just like an atomizer, a mister, it can't put all those droplets back together again. Well, fortunately, we don't have to, because they were never really separate. That's what the mind has to discover again, that in its stillness, when it stops that whole process of breaking everything up, separating things out, unity is already present, fully, to be known here and now, always. So that's what we come together to do. And we come together both so that we can get free of that illusion of all the separateness and all the differences and all the sense of lacking things and wanting things and needing things that come out of that mind-born reality of deficiency. Not having things, and then constantly being driven to acquire them on one level or another. To get free of that, well, that's what the Eastern traditions called liberation. When Buddha talked about nirvana as extinguishing, he was talking about extinguishing all the cravings, wantings, needings that come out of ignorance. The root of all suffering is ignorance. So we want to get free ourselves, and we want to be in that state that then empowers us to free all beings, because all beings are our own self. There is no separation. There is no other. So sometimes that commitment, the commitment to becoming completely free, the commitment to realizing one's highest nature, however we might call that, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, fully realized, liberated, a variety of names, to be committed to both knowing that, attaining that, and then living that into the world to save all beings. Now, that is an exalted goal, and is really seen as, it's the highest goal of human existence. It's really at the root of why we take birth, is to know that and serve that truth as the very being of who we are. But it doesn't mean what often people think about, the mind in its games of being too much of a caretaker. And, I don't want to have to take care of everybody. I don't have to do this. This is too much. Let me just serve the best I can, which is fine for the ordinary mind. But that kind of vow, that kind of intent, isn't about, still inhabiting the little mind that gets exhausted, the little mind that feels like it's doing too much, the little mind that gets caught up in those ways. That neurotic mind is not who you are. It's not your Buddha nature. It's not trying to say, you're going to come, it's going to come through that. We have to come to know the infinitude of being as our very self. Then those boundless qualities of boundless compassion, boundless wisdom, unshakable peace, rapturous joy, inexhaustible, eternal. They're not the ego-driven substitutes that the mind tries to create by trying to be a good person. I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be compassionate, I'm going to be patient. But the poor ego mind runs out of those things so quickly, it confronts then its own limitations. Those limitations don't belong to the truth of who you are. They don't belong to the truth of our own divine nature. So we're stepping out of that entire model. We have compassion for the mind caught in that. We have compassion and patience for that. But that idea of attaining the highest and living that effortlessly, inexhaustibly, eternally into the world for the benefit of all beings who are our very nature, that is a whole other order of reality than what the ordinary ego mind inhabits. So, and that's what the practices are aimed at differentiating, say, that's not me. That's the false self. Not me, not mine. Bodhidharma, great Zen patriarch, that was his favorite phrase. Not me, not mine. All the stuff that comes up, not me, not mine. Because, the truth of who we are, that's unspeakable. You can't even give it a name. We give it names, and it will happily wear a name to help us relate to it, whether it's Tara or Ma Kali or Shiva or Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Grandmother Spirit, Great Goddess Bridget, all different names. Now, going beyond names, that's where our consciousness is inviting us to know what transcends all forms, gives birth to all forms, is all forms, and simultaneously is beyond all forms. Incomprehensible for the ordinary mind, unspeakable, cannot be encoded in language, in thoughts. So that's the mystery. That's what we head into through these practices. And this is a time, as I wrote about in the e-newsletter today and was highlighting some of the work of the great Jungian analyst Anne Baring and her works, that have really focused on the necessity of what's coming up for humanity, of needing to get connected, related, the functions of the divine feminine that have gotten lost over our last few thousand years of history, where with the rise of male dominance and toxic patriarchy and toxic masculinity. I say toxic because there are healthy ways of being obviously balanced and engaged and not caught up in that toxic paradigm. But it's what we're seeing now is the outcome of that toxic paradigm. The split from nature, the split from feelings, the split from the feeling side, the denigration of women, their loss of power, powers of masculine dominance coming in and trying to further reduce their powers. That's what we're seeing here in our country. So this is a critical time for being able to summon within ourselves and see how prevalent the divine feminine has been in our spiritual systems. But again, its view was skewed because they were interpreted by a toxic masculine paradigm. And I wanted to call your attention to this wonderful new book that Andrew Harvey. Now, Andrew Harvey is a wonderful writer on mysticism, especially related to the divine feminine. He and Anne Baring wrote a book together on the Divine Mother. And so he is dedicated his life, much like Anne Baring has, and much in the same way I have. I mean, he's written very generously blurbs for The Soul's Journey and for the various volumes of poetry that have come through the divine feminine, come through the feminine face of the infinite, that then pours out in Kali's Bazaar and Oh My Beloved and Gently Falls Her Rain of Light. And now the new one that should be coming out in a few months, Invite Them In, she said. So this influx of the divine feminine into our world now and is the presence that we need to heal the rifts that have happened and heal the destruction to our planet that is extinguishing countless beings and whole species every year. To turn that around, that demands we connect with that whole feeling side, nurturing side, the compassionate side, the side that isn't just dominated by an I, me, mine, I don't care what happens to anybody else. That is what's being ushered out, and that's what we see so many powers clinging to so desperately, and then trying to be all that more oppressive and very, very clearly so in our country, but not just isolated to here. We see it in dominator modes and dictatorships around the world. All of this coming to a head because this needs to be eradicated for our species to survive and to evolve into the balanced fullness of being that we are truly capable of. So Andrew Harvey has put out this new book, The Magdalene Revolution, and I really recommend it to everybody. It's a fabulous book, and similar to what Anne Baring's works have done. He helps to trace what has happened to that living presence of the divine feminine, especially in Christianity, and the history of how that was lost over the last 2,500, 3,000 years, because it started even before Christ came on the picture. In many ways, Christ and Mary Magdalene are seen as having come in to try and usher in this sacred union of the masculine and the feminine. But of course, with the loss of Christ through, again, the masculine powers that be, Roman and others that crucified him, and then denigrated the divine feminine in the form of Mary Magdalene, his teachings got interpreted through this toxic patriarchal lens. So what Andrew Harvey is trying to do is, reclaim that, redeem that, and show what was in these profound teachings and the profound experiences of Christian mystics now across a couple of thousand years, and including going back to writings from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, going back to some of the original writings of Jesus, to show how this integrated view and this connection to the feminine and really bringing in the dimension of sacred love, sacred union that is meant to be lived by everyone, each in their own lives, in their own ways. But that's what we're being called to, because that's what the fullness of our being is about. We see that in the Buddhist tradition with the emphasis on compassion, loving compassion. That is emphasized because it's not just about having a good analytical mind, and without that analytical mind, without compassion, just becomes hard and brittle. So it's even those practices are summoning that we have this whole other dimensions of our being that are fully present. Practices start out as if we're doing loving kindness practice. We're doing practices of compassion, the practice of wanting to attain the highest and set all beings free, and to keep coming back until that is made so. That's seen as a practice of compassion. We're putting aside our own just self-interests and are interested in being able to attain the highest for the benefit of all beings, that all beings deserve to know the fullness of their sublime transcendent nature. And get free of the suffering that's born of the ignorance and the lack and the want and the needs that come out of that. We see it in yoga. Many times people aren't aware, hatha yoga, they think, we're just doing, asanas and postures and everything. All of yoga is about union. And hatha yoga, Kundalini yoga, which gave birth to hatha yoga, is looking at, what's the union? Well, Kundalini is Shakti. It's the feminine. So again, it's a symbolic system talking about how the power of the infinite divine feminine within is awakened and dissolves all the levels of differentiation and separation that bind the ordinary mind. And furthermore, it's symbolized by, in the Hatha Yoga Kundalini system, there's a central channel called the Sushumna channel. And that's the Sushumna nadi that runs up and down roughly where the spine is, though it's not a physical thing. Where the complete wisdom, as a matter of fact, it's where mantra arises from. Within the Sushumna nadi, you can hear Om constantly reverberating. It's the power that is united and creating all that is as it is within itself as it is. Then as it starts to manifest further, you see these two channels that are called the Ida and the Pingala, that are seen as sort of going back and forth around that central channel. We also see it symbolized in the caduceus that you see as a symbol for medical healing, because it's in that balance around the center that we want to create the deepest levels of healing, heal the very rift of the wounds of separation from the divine. But what's the Ida and the Pingala? That's the sun and the moon, the masculine and the feminine, that appear to be separate, but they're in this interplay. But we want to see them reunited. Where do they get reunited? In the Sushumna nadi. And then it goes up to the transcendent domain, Sahasrara, into the infinite, all-encompassing knowing, nothing left out. The infinite embrace of love that is knowing. Knowing and loving, the same, the one, for the one. Not two separate things. Oh, I can know some things and I can love some others, and how do I put them together? That's only for the mind. For consciousness itself, that unity is already fully present. So one of the ways that we want to understand that the transformative power of practices works is that, yes, there are practices that we're doing for our mind and body. Practice and attitude of loving kindness. Practice and attitude of seeing others as the divine. Those are practices. Those help the mind get oriented in the right direction. They are not what actually creates the state of knowing. They create and help to train the mind so that it can become aligned and transparent to what's already fully there as your state of full being, here, now, always. So the fullness of that state of absolute freedom, that state of liberation, that state of nirvana, that state of satori, however we want to call it, the state of being, transfigured by the infinite, the divine in the moment. That state is eternal and always present, everywhere, in all beings, all times. So our practices don't create that state. They create a mind aligned and ready to serve that state. And they help us to be able to then, as the mind gets quieter and quieter, to see, not with the ordinary eyes. This is why it's symbolized by the third eye. See with the eye of wisdom, the one eye, the eye that sees unity. When consciousness goes from unity vision to duality vision, the whole landscape changes. That's why in meditation we're letting go of all of that. We're becoming immersed in unity, first as just, how can I help quiet the noisy mind? How can I even have an opportunity to see past thoughts if every time a thought comes up, I identify with it, get attached to it, defend it, argue with it, feel bad that I have that thought, whatever it might be? You're still in that swamp, running around in that inner rat race. So the meditation practice is saying, no, none of that is you. Right? If you step aside, whether it's there or not, doesn't matter. Enter the luminous quality of consciousness that even illuminates limited binding thoughts. What illuminates them? What makes them perceptible? The light of consciousness. What makes a sensation in your body perceptible? The light of consciousness. What makes a dream perceptible in the middle of night when it's pitch black? No activity from the senses. What illuminates the dream? The light of consciousness. What illuminates deep sleep so that when we've been profoundly asleep, we can wake up and go, oh, I had such a deep sleep. What was awake? What was aware? Awareness itself. Because awareness itself is not conditioned by states of mind. So these are foundational understandings for understanding how meditation, it's setting us free on the most profound levels of identification and attachment to the mind and all its content. All the narratives, all the stories we've told ourselves, all the identities we've identified with, all the things we learned from our parents, from our coaches, from our religions, from our peers, from coaches, all that conditioning that we are aware of, because when it gets triggered, we go, oh, I got triggered. Something automatic happened. Conditioned mind happened. That's what happened. Right? Simultaneously present, always, is the luminous one, illuminating that quality of whatever the mind is going through in the moment. And if we more and more shift our attention away from content to the luminous source, then all that content just starts to settle more and more. Because part of what feeds the generation of the mind's content is attention. Attention, attention, attention. As you think, so you become. Give your attention to awareness, you become boundless, infinite awareness. Give your attention to a thought of I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm happy, I'm sad. You become those things. So the meditative traditions have been laying out this profound level of psychology, studying the operation of mind and consciousness for thousands of years, and made it clear how we can make use of those insights to become free. How we might interpret those may vary by what our religion is and how that informs our notion of what these transcendent mystical experiences are. But in the end, even that has to go. They all have to go. So any of those things for a mystic wind up being binding. So even the most profound descriptions or ways that a religion might have of holding that, if it's holding it as a form, it's going to have to be left behind. This is the great Christian mystic Meister Eckhart, back in the 12th, 13th century, talking about the last obstacle to God is God. What do you mean? Our understanding, our concept of God is in the way. That's got to go. And then he went on and said, in order to know God, we have to go beyond all forms, all mediating forms. Yes, we have our personal forms that we love and they help us relate to it and connect to it. But if we want to know, we fully want to know, we have to go beyond that. And then he goes on to say, the I has to become him, and he has to become me. So much so, we are completely one in knowing. So the creator and the creature, united in knowing, there's only one. There's only one. Inseparable, unspeakable. That's what we're endeavoring to fully experience for ourselves, and then be empowered to live into the world and show there is a way to be free. And we don't have to have the toxic institutions, economic systems, etc., that are all born of the same ignorance that drives that whole dominator mode of dominate, exploit, turn it into waste and throw it aside. So we can stop. We can stop. We don't have to turn the entire planet into a wasteland. We are empowered. And knowing that, even getting an inkling of that, gives us power to say, no, this has to stop. We have to turn this around. We have to change this. We can't operate on that power dynamic. And it's something that Carl Jung pointed out, decades ago, that when people are just motivated by the power principle, which is what has come through in the toxic masculine. When I say toxic masculine, I don't mean just men, because the same energies are present throughout humanity. Tends to be more so in men, worse in men. But it's not masculine like it's only men. It's talking about that's separated out, detached, really sort of alienated from reality, alienated, getting disconnected from the living presence of nature, of the environment, of our ancestors, of other beings living on the planet. That we have the capacity to cut through that and transform that now, before it's too late. We're at a critical point, and that's why I'm encouraged to see so much of the different ways that the divine feminine that is springing up, and how we're talking about that, and the talk about being compassionate, being kind, being loving, being caring. We don't have to call it goddess. We don't have to call it divine feminine. We're going to call it the supreme feeling function of humanity, that we can feel for other beings, and then say, oh, I don't want that to happen to them in the same way I don't want it to happen to me. We are related and connected even before we get to the point of knowing that we're actually one. That relationship is the one of unity. That's the ultimate realization. Way before that, we just have the felt sense of connectivity and caring, and how much that transforms our world when we're walking in the world with that felt sense of connection and care for all beings and our fellow humans. So all the practices are aimed at this, of being able to reconnect with that and reclaim that. And that's what Andrew Harvey was talking about in his new book. It's what Anne Baring has talked about in many of her books. But you'll also see it in my book, The Soul's Journey. And when I was writing about that and about the work of Riane Eisler, who was really explored and wrote about how we can see over the last several thousand years that dominator mode of toxic masculinity that overthrew the living presence of the divine feminine, that for so many tens of thousands of years, the great goddess was worshipped by humanity, and we lived very differently on this planet. So now we need to come back to a balanced point so that both are present, so that the fullness of both energies are here to support us, flourishing together and helping all beings on this planet to be able to have their place to flourish. So our practices are aimed at knowing the state that informs that makes that spontaneous and effortless. Spontaneous and effortless. Practice isn't spontaneous when it starts out because we're efforting. We're going, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? Oh, that's right, I'm not supposed to go with my conditioned mind that wants to, tell this person off or do this other thing or act aggressively that way in a way that's not helpful. So we're doing a lot of what the yogis talked about as the yamas and the niyamas. The first limbs of yoga, having to do with restraints and observances to help transmute that energy and impulse that was coming out of ignorance, hold it, let it get free, and help it fuel our intention to come to know the highest and live in that fully all the time, in all times, in all places. And to be able to pass that on to others, that they may be equally free. So all our practices are coming together in that way. And it's, even in the Buddhist tradition these days, I hear, various ways they're talking about, the next Buddha. And there are great Buddhist masters who say, well, the next Buddha, Maitreya is love, this boundless, infinite, loving presence. It's exactly what's called for. And then it may not be just an individual, that the incarnation of that is going to be collective, in community, because that's where we need to have it. We need to see it manifest through many beings. Too often we see it manifest in one being, we leave them up there on some pedestal, and then we don't realize, no, that's me. I can and I will live like that if I commit myself to it. But we start to see it spread out through the Sangha, through groups, that loving compassion, that wisdom of being able to live in community and help one another flourish, help the environment flourish, that we are empowered to do that. So that's part of what's being summoned at this time, are new visions of how this integrative perspective can inform our lives and transform our institutions, transform our economic systems. Because it really is about, now's the time, we have to flourish together. Because if we don't flourish together, we may well sink together. And that's also is requiring us to own our power to create change, to enter that fray of politics and dynamics so that they're not just left to those who are power seekers, because somebody who wants power is the last person you want to have power. And then those who don't want power, they don't seek the power. But we need the exercise of power to come through selfless, heart-centered beings. So that's part of what we're being called upon to do, is to evolve so that we don't just shun power. We realize, no, power in the wrong hands, used for the wrong reasons, just creates more oppression. But how do we use power, and how do we have a collective wisdom around that so that we can make the changes necessary that are going to create the right pathway for our future evolution as a species, to go beyond operating from the first three chakras, the first three instinctual centers that don't differentiate us from any other animal walking on this planet. But then we have these other four chakras, all levels of consciousness that get more and more integrative, higher functioning, until we get to the top where we can see through the eyes of unity and say, oh, we can bring love into all of this. We can bring compassion into all of this. We can set up systems that are made to help everybody flourish in their unique talents, their unique abilities, their unique pathway in this life, that we can embrace that. That's what we're capable of. And that's what the practices then empower us to know directly and see, and then walk it into the world for the benefit of all beings. However quietly we might be doing that in our own lives, we're a carrier of the truth. And that truth, that both empowers us and helps to illuminate what's possible for others. So thank you for being ones doing that and carrying this into your world, your lives, your relationships, your work. Because that's what all this transformation is about, transforming not only just our inner world, but the outer world for the sake of all beings. That's what we're doing. Yeah. So now we're going to chant for a few minutes and just become absorbed in the power of consciousness. Mantra is known as the sound form of the infinite. So sacred sound is used across traditions in various ways, but always as a way of taking us beyond the discursive, thought-filled mind. So we become absorbed in Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to the infinite, the auspicious one. It's beyond name and form, beyond gender, beyond everything. Om Kali Ma, Kali Durga Namo Namah. Bowing to Ma Kali. And this divine couple, Shiva and Shakti. Just like, Andrew Harvey is writing about the divine union represented by Christ and Mary Magdalene, the masculine and the feminine. Well, we see that also throughout the traditions. We see it in the Buddhist traditions and how it's portrayed with the union of wisdom and compassion and various icons and statues that represent this connection between the masculine and the feminine in union. But that union is already here. It's not, the mind is, if it takes it on, I have to create the union, it's going to get very frustrated and overwhelmed because it can't do that. It has to get out of the way so you directly perceive it. Then it's going to be challenged to, how do I stay true to that? How do I listen to that within myself? How do I walk that into this world? How do I carry that? How do I allow that direct experience to inspire and inform my life, breath by breath, day by day, action by action? So that's then, that's the purview of the mind. How to be able to be aligned with that and carry that and be true to that, be true to the highest in yourself and being true to the highest that's present in all beings, all creation. But it doesn't create the unity. It gets quieter and quieter, and our direct perception of it becomes more and more luminous, more and more expansive, more and more encompassing, until we know it in its fullness, where there's nothing left out. So we'll become absorbed in the chant of Om Namah Shivaya, and then we'll just sit for a few minutes in the stillness. And in that stillness, if the mind moves, let it just keep moving with Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. You might say it quickly, you might say it slowly, you might say it with the breath. Om Namah Shivaya, slowly as the breath comes in. Om Namah Shivaya, slowly as the breath goes out. That's a particularly powerful way of doing it, because when we slow and deepen the breath, it transforms our physiology and our neurophysiology. And so by coming into that rhythm and just becoming absorbed in that, it helps to settle the mind and body. Because again, the settling of the mind means just watching it with love, compassion, patience, and the awareness, I am not my mind. And the awareness illuminating all. So we'll chant and then we'll sit. Om Namah Shivaya. 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 Resting in the awareness of I am all that is. I am the mantra. I'm the source of the mantra. And the boundless awareness illuminating all experiences. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Resting in the truth of who you are. Om Namah Shivaya. Durge Ma. Om Kali 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 Durge Ma. We end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. And the Divine Feminine is also associated with that state of openness, the state of receptivity, the state of our being, simply being, free of doing, simply being, to be silent, to be still, be empty, to be in the silence that's unbroken by all sound, all movement. The silence that gives rise to all sound, all movement. The stillness that's unmoved by movements of mind or body, untouched by movements in the world. To be still, to know that spaciousness of being, unmoved, untouched by all that unfolds in creation, that it holds it all, the stillness, the silence, out of which all arises, into which all dissolves. To know that as one's being. The being suffused with boundless love, boundless compassion, boundless wisdom, unshakable steadiness and peace. This is what we're invited to know. To leave behind the active and deluded mind, deluded by its sense of individuality, its ignorance of its fullness of being. To leave that behind, to become suffused with knowing, that then suffuses the mind, transforms the mind by the grace of that presence, of your own fullness of being, that you live in accord with that, because that's the unitive vision that empowers us to always see, oh, there are no others. There's only the divine, my own being, my own self. So thank you for being ones doing the practices and the contemplation, the mantras, the studying, everything, to become suffused with that direct knowing and empowered to walk it into the world. So you yourself are free and hold the light of freedom aloft for others to see that it's possible. We can be free. We can act from that place of freedom and transform this troubled world. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for coming this evening and bringing the fullness of your being. Thank you for the many ways you support Ahamkara, sharing what we offer in our videos and e-newsletters. That makes all the difference. Just trying to reach out and help anybody seeking to know who they are beyond the confines of the ordinary mind. So thank you. And thank you for your donations in support of what we're doing. So thank you for everything. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.